Hey guys, Pete here. This will be my Better Call Saul Season 5, Episode 4 recap and review. The episode gets its name, Namaste, from Howard Hamlin's Vanity license plate. And before we get into that, this is your spoiler warning. If you haven't watched Episode 4 of Season 5 yet, this video will spoil it. Hit the subscribe button for my channel since I'll be covering Better Call Saul through the end of the series. But then go watch the episode before coming back to watch this video. Episode 4 is another good installment. It's on par with the previous episode, and I like the way things are moving forward. Namaste opens with Kim and Jimmy in bed on the morning after we saw them tossing beer bottles from their balcony. The apartment looks like they partied for a while after that, and the fact that we see that they're nude in bed is a nice subtle touch for a show that doesn't often go there. It's a good reminder that there's more to this relationship than just what will be the thing that happens to get Kim out of the picture. It may also be tied to the fact that we know Kim gets somewhat turned on by acting out with Jimmy. We've seen that throughout the series. And while the camera lingers on their nakedness for a moment, we as viewers don't linger on them at home for very long. We see them outside as they say their goodbyes and discuss their plans for the day. Kim tells them that yesterday was bad and today she's going to fix it. It's perfect that Jimmy is more than comfortable with someone else cleaning up their mess, but that Kim's compelled to stay behind and do it herself. As she's cleaning the bottles up, she's talking on the phone, putting things in place to clean up the Mr. Acker mess from episode 3. Jimmy's day involves visiting the 50% off guys who are now his clients. They've been arrested. The big takeaway here is that he's showing signs of the lawyer that we know from Breaking Bad. At one point, he suggests that he knows of less than reputable establishments that will fulfill a rehab requirement without his clients actually having to attend one. He uses some theatrics to get them to pay rather than going the public pretender route, and this is the most Saul we've seen him be. Later, we see him have his highly anticipated lunch with Howard. It turns out that he's offering a job at HHM, and Jimmy, or rather Saul, isn't exactly interested. There is so much going on here given all that we know about their relationship over the years and the role that Chuck played in both of their lives. Howard does seem to be sincere in his offer, and from his point of view, he's doing what's right in order to make up for the fact that he blocked Jimmy out because that's what Chuck wanted him to do. It's fascinating to watch as Jimmy processes the offer, which deep down he knows isn't the right fit for him at this point. He keeps his cards close to his vest in that he doesn't really explain whether he would want to do that or not, but he reinforces the idea that the last time he worked at a big firm, Davis and Main, didn't turn out very well. The fact that Howard brings up the scholarship meeting really stood out to me because that scene after the scholarship meeting really stood out to me at the end of last season. Howard frames it as, he fought for this girl and they were too harsh, they didn't listen to him. But remember, Jimmy laid that speech on the girl, and after the fact, you realize that he's sort of just talking to himself. You see him break down in the car, and in reality, he's sort of processing the fact that he's never going to be accepted as Jimmy McGill, and that means he'll never fit in at HHM. I like how we see him hitting his stride in the 50% off guys meeting, and then that comes into play directly here, as he's actually kind of better suited for that than working at a big firm and doing the right thing. However, it's still really interesting to think that this offer has been laid on the table, so later when things go wrong, Jimmy can always look at that as a mistake that he made, a chance that he let go by without taking it. Imagine Gene sitting in Cinnabon thinking about how different his life might be if he would have taken Howard up on his offer. The hug at the end was also a very nice touch. I think we see that Howard is being absolutely sincere. He does care for Jimmy. But the bottom line is that's not really his motivation here, whether he realizes it or not. He thinks Jimmy would be good for the firm. He thinks it's a win-win. It's possible that this is part of his recovery process since he is somebody who was in really low points last season. And now we see that he's getting better. He's doing something, obviously, to get from point A to point B. Perhaps he thinks that making this situation better will have a positive effect on his own well-being. That could also be where we see after Jimmy goes and vandalizes his car, where we see the word Namaste on the license plate. Nothing about Howard that we knew before would have made this make sense, this license plate, right? And so we really don't know where Howard's coming from, but Jimmy is probably on some level correct in thinking that, one, he's not doing it because he really cares about Jimmy so much, and two, that Jimmy is in fact not a good fit for this job. Since I mentioned where it all ends with Jimmy basically vandalizing Howard's car in return for the offer of a job, it's worth mentioning that this was a really cool teaser in this episode where we saw him in the secondhand or antique shop where he's looking at the weights of all these different things. I love how we have no idea what that is when we see it, but we know that this show is going to pay it off, and I really enjoyed when we see it all go down in the end. At a meeting at Mesa Verde with Kevin and Paige, we see Kim's plan, what she had in mind. She tries to change their minds about the location. She scouts out a different location, and she makes a presentation that would involve them moving over there and Mr. Acker not leaving his home. She brings up the idea of reputational risk, that they could make Tucumcari like this Mesa Verde town, basically, and it's not a convincing argument. Kevin isn't interested at all. He asks her if they are legally the owners of the lot they already have. She says yes, and he basically says Mr. Acker's not going to get in the way of what he needs to do. This sets things in motion for her to go to plan B, and we see her show up at the courtroom where Jimmy's working his magic a little bit later. In Kim fashion, she tries it on the up and up. She tries to give them an alternate that they can follow through on, but when it doesn't work, she resorts to Saul Goodman. And Mr. Goodman is commanding the courtroom. He sets up this scam where he is up against an eyewitness, and he gets someone who looks like his defendant to sit at the table with him and has a positive ID made just so he can reveal the fact that it's in fact not the actual defendant. This was pretty fun, and he gets a mistrial out of it, which was what he was trying to do. But I think my favorite shot in this whole courtroom sequence was the back of Kim's head whenever we're watching her sitting there, and we see how perfect her ponytail is. She waits there for some time until Jimmy comes out to tell her the news that there's a mistrial, and she tells him that she needs his help with her problem. The thing about the ponytail and Kim in general that stands out is that she's really good at taking things on and doing what she has to do. And even with a little bit of reflection, I mean, it seems like a terrible idea to get Saul involved with this situation. I've said that I wanted to see Mr. Acker come back, and I thought that they were going to probably use this character since they used Barry Corbin as the actor, but I'm really starting to question, how is it that she could come up with a plan that would involve Jimmy? Yes, his name is Saul now, but everybody knows that's her boyfriend. So I'm starting to wonder if she's not thinking about torpedoing her own career, but we'll talk about that later after we get through the recap. Jimmy goes to Tucumcari, and he gets his foot in the door literally to talk to Mr. Acker, who doesn't have any kind of interest in talking to him. Here we get a literal laugh out loud moment. After saying that nothing can persuade him into wanting a lawyer, Jimmy hands him something through the door, which he says, "I just want you to take a look at my proposal." And it turns out that it's a picture of a man and a horse. This was hilarious. Like, I don't even know. I'm laughing about it now, just thinking about it. I don't know what I was expecting that piece of paper to be, but it definitely wasn't what it turned out to be. I guess Mesa Verde, their logo is a horse. It's a man on a horse, so maybe that's what inspired him. I'm not exactly sure. But either way, Jimmy is able to get Mr. Acker's attention, and things go as he planned. In the timeline of things, when he leaves there, I guess is when the teaser would have happened, where he picks up the bowling balls, and then he goes from there to Howard's house and enacts his plan. At that same time, I guess, we see the DEA agents, Hank and Gomie. They're on their stakeout, waiting for the dead drop. There's an enjoyable amount of back and forth between the two, reminding us of what a great show Breaking Bad was. And then we see things play out as the guy comes to pick up the money. We learn as this happens that it is very thoroughly planned out by Gus, to the point of the guy even looking at them so they think they might have got made, which would make sense for him to run away. While the Hank and Gomie stuff is fantastic, the real tension from this scene comes from Gus and Lyle, and Lyle's cleaning up of the Friars. The way these two things are intertwined together, it's really a fantastic sequence put together by the first-time director, Gordon Smith, who wrote the episode as well. As I was watching Lyle scrub and that drop of sweat coming off of his nose, it made me think about the fact that Gus is the guy who's always in charge and he's always manipulating things, and he's clearly got a good plan here to get what he wants out of this bad situation. But there's also some fear and I think some recognition in that with Lalo, he does have a worthy opponent. We don't see any Lalo or Nacho in this episode, but we see just how uptight Gus is as a result of Lalo coming to to the US. I also thought it was a nice touch how at the end, Hank is somewhat disappointed with what happened. He wanted to go upstream rather than downstream. And they did arrest some people and they got some money, but he wasn't happy with the way it played out. Although we see him go into season 1 Hank mode where he addresses everyone who was involved and he puts on this like macho act to be like, yeah, we did a great thing and we're going to go out and have drinks in the first round on me, you know. I thought that was a pretty good representation of both sides of the character that we saw fleshed out over the years in Breaking Bad. In the end, I guess Gus got out of this as good as he could, and I'm really curious to see what his next move will be now that it's all said and done. The Mike portion of the episode gave us a reminder of where he's at as far as he's definitely barely holding things together here. Stacy calls him out because she doesn't think that it's a good idea that he watch Kaylee, and she knows something's going on. He insists that nothing is, but clearly there is. He goes and acts out again and puts himself into this situation where he can fight the gang that tried to rob him before, and he ends up getting stabbed in the end of it. That leads to a really interesting turn in the story when he wakes up in what looks to be Mexico. We don't know how much of a flash forward is there, but the implication is that he lost consciousness at some point in this process, and the very next thing that he knows is that he's somewhere else in the world entirely. My best guess here is that this is Gus's doing. It would make sense that Gus kind of keeps tabs on him. Maybe somebody saw this go down and they acted. Like I said, I think it's probably in Mexico. He could be seeing that same doctor that he saw in Breaking Bad after he got shot. There's a very slight chance that this could be Lalo's doing. We'll have to wait and see, but I really don't think that's the case. We do know that Lalo's been trying to track Mike down, so we have to at least think that it could be a possibility. The reason why I think it's more likely Gus is because we know where Mike ends up, and I think that in the end there's going to be more reason that he works with Gus, if that makes sense. Like last season we saw him do the super lab. It was sort of just a job. It wasn't an alliance with Gus. I feel like some point in Better Call Saul we're going to see that actually become an alliance where he's there because he wants to be there. I don't mean that he wants to be in the drug business per se, but if you think about Jimmy becoming Saul Goodman and you think about it in relation to that conversation after the scholarship meeting with the Esposito girl, Jimmy thinks that Saul is the best that he could do. Like he deserves to be Saul. And I think that Mike will eventually get to a point like that too. Those are the main things that went down in the episode. I mentioned the Kim thing, and my theory right now, just after watching the episode one time, is that Kim is actually going to torpedo things. We know that something's going to happen with Kim, but she's going to use Jimmy in this way, and we're going to see a turn of events of like where he at the end of last season tricked her in the bar hearing where she was really feeling it and she was really seeing this side of Jimmy that she knew was there and wanted to see come out. I feel like there's going to be a little bit of a reversal of that here. Whatever she has planned with Mr. Acker and Saul and Mesa Verde and Schweikert and Coakley, I think there's probably going to be more to it than what we can see on the surface so far. You guys can let me know in the comments what you think and what you liked about this episode and what you think is going to happen next. What do you think about Jimmy becoming Saul? What do you think is going through his head at this point in the game? Do you think him not taking the HHM gig is going to come back to haunt him later in his life once all this plays out? Please like this video if you enjoyed it. Please subscribe to my channel if you haven't already. Thanks for watching. I will talk to you soon.